Hello, everyone. There we go. Okay. Sorry, we've got a couple of trying to figure out our technology situation here. This one. There we go. Okay. Perfect. Sorry about that. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. We are recording this training so you can go back to revisit anything that we are covering tonight. Go ahead. I'm going to start screen sharing. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. um, can you hear me okay if we just have Elisa? Elisa and I are sitting right next to each other, but we're just having the volume on her computer, but I'm assuming that you can hear me okay if we just do that, and so we don't end up making things weirdly echoey. So welcome everyone to Pollinator Ambassadors. We are going to be going over the first part of our training, and first we'll start by just introducing ourselves. So my name is Elaine Evans. I am an extension educator and researcher here at the University of Minnesota. I work in the Bee Lab in St. Paul. I do a lot of engaging people in learning about pollinators and public participation in science projects, and a lot of different just general conservation work with a lot of different kinds of bees and bee habitat.
Awesome. And my name is Elise Bernstein. I am part of the Bee Squad team here at the Bee Lab. So the Bee Squad is kind of the outreach and education arm. So we're sort of the public face of the lab. So I do lots of outreach coordinating for the Bee Squad and do lots of talks and presentations and tabling and things around the Twin Cities. And then I help to support bumblebee research in the lab with Elaine as well. So I work on the Bumblebee Atlas project as well as NestQuest. And I'm excited to be doing this Pollinator Masters training. We've had a lot of fun with this program so far.
So I am going to start just with an icebreaker. So we've got a good number of people here. So we are going to utilize the chat to get to know each other a little bit. So we would like you to open up your chat and share what county you're from. And since we have a nice cold day here, what is your favorite comfort food on a cold day?
Give those a minute to trickle in here. I think my favorite comfort food on a cold day is probably chicken wild rice soup or a pot roast.
So yeah, I'm from Ramsey County, and for me, I would have to say mashed potatoes, which is pretty much always my comfort food, whether it's cold or not.
Oh, Karen is in Florida.
Oh.
No cold days. Awesome. So it looks like we've kind of got some good representation here from lots of different parts of the state. That's very cool.
I am going to start by just going over the agenda of what we're going to do today. So we're going to start by talking about what Pollinator Ambassadors has been and kind of what it's becoming, going over some of the requirements for being a volunteer and how to apply. And we're going to go then just jump right into the first part of our training here too. The Pollinator Ambassadors Program, we started doing this a while ago. When there was, there's been kind of increasing awareness about pollinators, which has been really nice. It's not nice that that there are pollinator declines for people to be concerned about, but they've been going on for a while, but people are becoming more aware of what's going on with pollinators. And here at the University of Minnesota Bee Lab, we've been getting more and more requests for pollinator education, and it started being more than we could meet just with our own capacity, as well as us being limited in terms of where we can get to. So we get requests from all across the state. We want to be able to serve all those areas with pollinator education, but it's difficult for us to get ourselves everywhere. So to bridge this gap, we've created this Pollinator Ambassadors program. We first we've been working on this program for a while. Our first kind of projects where we have these pollinator education toolkits, which you'll be hearing a lot more about. But we designed these to be these kind of self-explanatory pollinator education kits that we can provide to educators to make it easier for people to teach about pollinators. We were able to distribute 250 of these to educators that are all across Minnesota. We also have been working with high school science teachers. So we had a program called Pollinators in the Science Classroom, where we trained over 50 high school science teachers from all across Minnesota. And they're using the pollinator education toolkits and doing some pollinator curriculum in their schools. And we also had a program that was focused on youth, where we trained over 80 youth mostly in the Twin Cities and also in Rochester to be pollinator ambassadors, to reach different audiences, as these different people will have different connections than we do, instead of just necessarily giving pollinator education to all the people that come seek us. We want to also get spread out to reach new people that we aren't normally reaching. So now we have launched our newer version of our Pollinator Ambassador Volunteer Program. So we just started doing this last year, and we are focused more on adult volunteers to become pollinator education experts. And we are able to provide this expert guidance. We can ensure that all the materials that you're using are up to date with the most recent science that's coming out about pollinators and how to protect them. We're able to provide outreach materials and get you going.
All right. Do you want to keep sharing?
I can stop.
Can switch up here. I'm going to take over from. All right, everyone see that? Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. All right, so what exactly is a pollinator ambassador? So a pollinator ambassador is someone who understands the importance of pollinators to our food, agricultural, and ecological systems and the threats that pollinators face, knows the action steps to help others help pollinators, actively learns and shares what they know, and they're doing this sharing through presentations, writing, art, or other creative methods. And they're advocating through education, investigation, and action. So what are the qualifications for becoming a pollinator ambassador? We want you to be enthusiastic about insects. There are lots of different types of pollinators, which we'll get into in a little bit, but bees, wasps, flies, butterflies, moths, all of these different types of insects are important pollinators, and there's lots of other insects in our world and in our ecosystems that are super important. So an enthusiasm for insects is required to participate in this program. The second required qualification is committing to attend our trainings. So we have this virtual training tonight. Our part 2 virtual training is next Wednesday. We're hoping to do an in-person training, likely around the Twin Cities. That will be optional sometime in the spring as well. And then our third required qualification is a commitment to present at 5 pollinator events annually. So this is the biggest requirement for this program, is that after you're finishing your training, you're going out into your community and doing 5 events. So other additional qualifications that are not required but are a benefit, having any sort of background experience with public speaking or event coordination, any experience working in science or with insects can help benefit you. Being responsive to criticism and being excited to improve your skills, as well, is another important skill or important qualification that we will look for. It's not required, but is preferred. So this program is, like we said, application based. So once you apply, we will get you access to all of our training materials. There's a QR code on the screen here. I think, did you put the link in the chat?
I will.
Elaine's dropping the link in the chat as well for that application form. It's a pretty short application form. We just ask you to explain a little bit, about why you're interested in the program, what your background or experience is like. Then we get back to you pretty quickly. And I will send you an email with some instructions on how to get started with your training. So the bulk of our training is kind of in 2 separate parts. So part 1 is sort of the introduction to pollinator ambassadors. So this is available virtually. So for those of you that are attending now, we're also recording this so it can be viewed at a later time. But we are kind of in this presentation reviewing broadly pollinator biology and ecology, touching on conservation as well. And then we'll get into some of the different materials that are included in the pollinator toolkits, and how you might use the pollinator toolkit at a tabling event or while you're giving a presentation. There are different videos that go along with each of those specific activities that's available in the pollinator toolkit. And then there's an associated quiz with each of those videos. I'll do a walkthrough of our training portal in just a second, so you'll get an idea of what that looks like. And then part 2 of our training is kind of the volunteering 101. So this is the training that we're going to be offering next Wednesday, the 19th. So again, available virtually. That will also be recorded if you can't make it next week. And the bulk of what we'll talk about next week is kind of the expectations while you're volunteering. So we'll talk about how to be an effective public speaker. What are some questions that you might be asked while you're tabling or giving a presentation, how to answer some of those more difficult or complicated questions, how you might want to set up a display table at a tabling event. And we'll also get into some of our bonus content that is new to Pollinator Ambassadors in 2025. So like Elaine said, we kind of started this version of this program last year, but we have some even more brand new content from what we put out last year. So we are moving to a new training portal called Canvas. I think there are a few of you in this meeting right now that have started looking through the videos and quizzes and things that are on our Pollinator Ambassadors website, but we are opening up a new training portal. So this is called Canvas. This is what the university uses for all of their students, for graduates and undergrads, and then other, I guess, classes and things. So lots of the basic resources for the Pollinator Ambassadors program can still be found on our website, but all of the bulk of the training content, so this video, all of those other videos about the Pollinator Toolkit, as well as the quizzes and things will be accessed in Canvas. So let's do a short little walkthrough of Canvas here. I'm gonna switch to student mode. So after you apply for the program and receive your confirmation of yes, you can participate, we want you as a Pollinator Ambassador, you will get a link to register for Canvas. You'll have to set up an account. Registration for this Canvas course opens next Monday, the 17th. So folks that have already applied, I'll be sending out an email on Friday with that registration link so you can get ready to get started. But so this is the home page of our Canvas course. There's all of the modules kind of laid out here on this first page. So you can either start and walk through all of them, or you can kind of pick and choose which module you want to start with. But we'll go here to the start here. So the beginning, some of this content is just kind of an introduction to who we are. Then there's some information as well on getting help with technology. So if you're having issues with Canvas or you need any type of technology assistance during or while you're participating in this course, the university has resources to support you. So there's an email address as well as a phone number to call. Our contact information is listed on Canvas as well. Then here's some background information kind of about the course, some learning objectives and things that you will be learning while you're participating in the program. And then we get going into the modules. So our first module is this Introduction to Pollinator Ambassadors. So this is where you can access our volunteer handbook. Here is the recording of part 1 of training. So this is a recording of this same training that we did in 2024. We've got it broken up into a few different chunks. We also have one of the cool features of Canvas is these discussion boards. So we will stop you kind of as you're working your way through the content to ask you questions about the things that you're learning, to share some information about who you are, what you're excited to do in the program. I'm going to go back to our list of modules here just to jump to one where we have a quiz that goes with it. So the pollinator plate, for example, this is one of the pieces of the pollinator toolkit that we'll get into in a minute. But there is a short video here that kind of goes over that content. And then there is a quiz that goes along with that video. You can complete the quizzes and these different modules, at your own pace. So you can start with module 3 and jump to module 6 and then go back to module 4. If you'd like, you can kind of, pick and choose what order makes the most sense to you. But after you've completed the bulk of these modules here, we have a cumulative exam, and this one is the only one that's locked until all of the quizzes in the previous modules are completed. And then the content that's included after the cumulative exam, we'll kind of get into a little bit more next week. But some of these things like pesticides, climate, and policy are bonus content. So that's kind of for our pollinator ambassadors that want a little bit more information about those topics. Anything I missed?
This was good. Yeah.
Awesome. And if anybody has, questions or concerns or confusion about Canvas, we are happy to help you out with that.
Yeah, and we're hoping that that'll be a good place. Those discussions will be a good place for you all to connect as a community too. So getting to ask questions of other pollinator ambassadors will be really handy.
Yeah, we're really excited about this new training portal. The content is a lot more organized. It's a lot easier to kind of move through. The quizzes look a lot nicer. It'll be easier for us to connect with you. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, and one of the things that's fun about this program is that we're getting all these different brains in here with people with different approaches to things. And so, so people come up with different creative ideas about how to present content. So it's always fun to hear what people are doing.
Yeah. So now we've walked through Canvas. So once you have started, your training, we are requiring you to pass all of the individual quizzes that are associated with the videos. So passing, you have to get 70% or higher. And then we ask you to complete that cumulative exam and score well on that as well. The final component of the training is to give a practice presentation to Elaine and myself. So after you finish all of your quizzes and the cumulative exam, we want to see just a short 5-minute presentation of a topic of your choice, where just as an opportunity to kind of demonstrate your public speaking skills. And once you finish doing these things and we approve of your practice presentation, you are officially a Pollinator ambassador, and we will send you a Pollinator toolkit, and then you can use that toolkit in your events. So these are either tabling events, talks, presentations, things in your community, but you must host 5 events every calendar year to continue to participate in the program. Can pause here for a second. I will stop sharing. Does anyone have any questions so far? You can feel free and drop questions in the chat, unmute yourself. It's a great time to ask some questions.
I have a question.
Yes, Molly.
Sorry, Elise. Will the Canva replace the volunteer Facebook group?
Yes, that is the goal. Canvas, because everybody will already be in there for training, then it's something we know everybody has set up, and we don't want you to have to make multiple new accounts. So if there's folks that aren't already on Facebook, we're going to try and have everything, all of our discussions and stuff centered in Canvas.
This is Nicole. I have a question.
Yeah.
So when given your 5 presentations throughout the calendar year, can you give examples of what kind of settings presentations have been done at before?
Yeah, definitely. And we'll get into, the specifics of events and things in a lot more detail next week at our part 2 training. But some types of presentations that people have given are to local garden clubs. Some of our Pollinator ambassadors have worked with their libraries as well. You think of other examples. I said garden clubs, libraries, churches. Yeah, that's another great one. Other sort of like community ed opportunities like that. And we will help
County fairs.
Yeah, county fairs. When we're able to, we will help connect you with folks that are looking for presentations. Yeah, farmers markets, that's another one.
There are a lot of really good questions in the chat here too.
Okay, let's see.
So one person was asking if there is any cost, and there is not for the course or the applications. For someone is asking if the exams are open book. It is good if you can be relying on your memory. So these are questions that would be like what you would be getting at, when you're at a table presenting to people. You can retake quizzes so we can see where you're at. And, it's not super strict. When you are tabling, we do encourage you, if you don't know something, to look it up if you need to, or things like that.
And
But
it's always okay to not know things
Yeah.
too.
but it's nice for those quizzes if that can be something that you kind of practice and becomes, kind of general knowledge.
I see another question. Will you be informing us of events that are requesting ambassadors to speak? Yes, when we are able to. So that's part of the reason why in your application, we ask for what county you're based in. The B Squad gets so many event requests for lots of parts of the state that we're not able to travel to. So I do my best to kind of funnel those event requests to where I know that we have pollinator ambassadors, or when there's opportunities in the Twin Cities that we're not able to. So sometimes we're able to inform you of events, but sometimes you will have to kind of figure that out on your own. So to answer Stephen's questions, are we responsible for setting up and scheduling the 5 presentations? Yes. So this could look like, contacting, like I said earlier, like your local garden club, library in your community, seeing if they might be interested. Do any of our current, I know Molly is one of our existing pollinator ambassadors. Molly, do you want to comment at all on how your experience has been setting up your presentations?
Sure. I contacted my public library, and the librarian that have been communicating with it's so interested in having me come and do all of them through the course of the spring, summer, and early fall. So like 1 a month is what we're shooting for. And they actually have a rain garden, pollinator garden in the parking lot. So we're gonna go out and do some things out there after the indoor presentation, and connect it with some resources the library has available. But then also my church camp, they're doing a volunteer service weekend called Seeds of Service. And so they contacted me about doing pollinator ambassador presentations, and they're putting in a pollinator garden that weekend. So
Sure.
that's tying in well together. And then the third one is the West Otter Tail County Master Gardeners, rather. The Master Gardeners, that would be like the equivalent of a garden club around here. And they have monthly meetings. And so they also do a garden day event every spring. But when I found out about that, it was already full. So they're having me come speak at one of their March meeting.
Cool. Awesome. Sorry, I did not mean to put you on the spot, but I super appreciate your input. Awesome to have some of our existing pollinator ambassadors in this Zoom right now.
No problem.
Yeah, thanks, Molly. Jean was asking, can presentations include more than one ambassador? And that is totally fine. And that's great to collaborate and cooperate. The only thing, and that event can count for both of you for your 5 events. The place that we just need to keep track of things is we are keeping track of having you report back for each event how many people you're reaching. Sometimes it's just an estimate, sometimes you know more exactly, because we need to track that so we know what the outcome of this program is, so we can show people how great it is and continue to get funding to support it. And so for that, we need to just be careful that each event is only reported one time, because we don't want to overrepresent what we're doing.
Yeah, that's important. Looks like we've got one more question in the chat from Jackson. How old do you have to be to volunteer? You do have to be 18 to participate in the Pollinator Ambassadors program. That's a University of Minnesota policy, not just a Pollinator Ambassadors policy. So you have to be 18 to volunteer with the U.
And one more question showed up in the meantime. Is there a regional text or guidebook you recommend for supplementary materials? So there are some good regional, plant guides and things like that that can help with pollinators. for a lot of the content that we cover, it's on a fairly general level. There are, in some of the modules, we do have, resources to try to help you connect with more regional things, but, you know, if you're interested at having trouble finding any kind of materials that you want to for particular topics, we're happy to help out with that.
Awesome. All right. Well, for the sake of time, I'm going to jump back into sharing here. And if you think of any questions, you know, pop them in the chat. We'll get to them in our next break. So I think now that we've talked a little bit about, you know, the background and kind of expectations for this program, we can dive right into some of our training content. So today we will cover what is pollination, why are pollinators important, some of the basics of pollinator biology. We will introduce you to the pollinator toolkit. And those are the things. So why are pollinators important? So 80% of plants are reliant on animals for pollination. So this is the reason that, you know, pollinators are kind of the basis of a lot of our food chains and things. They are the reason that we have so many of the foods that we have. So what is the process of pollination? So pollen is moved from the anther to the stigma of a flower. This starts the process of fertilizing that ovule within that flower. The ovule is what ends up developing into the seed of a fruit. The ovary is what's considered the fruit. And whether plants need pollen moved within their own flowers, from a flower that's in a different part of the garden that they're in, they all need help moving that pollen. So sometimes plants are getting help from wind, sometimes they're getting help from water, but very often they're getting help from animals, and very often these animals are insects to move their pollen around to fertilize that plant and help it produce a fruit. Again, here's just another kind of depiction of what this process of pollination is looking like, how the pollen sort of travels through this pollen tube to fertilize that ovule. The ovule is, like I said, the seed, and the ovary of that plant is what develops into the fruit. So if we didn't have any pollinators, some plants would not produce any fruit at all without pollinators, you know, moving that pollen around between plants. Other plants might still produce some fruits, but the fruit might be smaller, a little bit oddly shaped, or even slower to ripen. So this is going to be your first introduction to the Pollinator Education Toolkit. So this is from an activity called the Pollinator Plate. So this is available in the physical Pollinator Toolkit as a card set, as well as a presentation in the virtual version. But the purpose of this activity is to kind of talk about how pollinators affect our diets and our food systems. So I'm going to go through a series of different foods here. I'm first going to show you the food as you know it today, and then I will show you the food, what it would look like on our plates if we didn't have any pollinators. So feel free to drop your answers in the chat. So if there were no pollinators, what would be left on this plate? First up, we have a plate of almonds. Give everybody just a minute to put in their predictions. Yeah, I'm seeing lots of people saying nothing. You are correct. If we did not have any bees or pollinators, we would not have almonds. So in order for almond trees to produce nuts, almonds need help from insects to move pollen from an almond plant of one variety to a different variety. Next up, we have this glass of cranberry juice. What would be left in our glass if we did not have any pollinators? Some people say water, just a little bit, nothing. Good guesses. So if there were no pollinators, we would have very little cranberry juice. So very few cranberry fruits are produced without insect pollinators. So cranberries need help from our pollinators in order to produce fruit. So we would have very little cranberry juice. What about this big bowl of ice cream? What would happen to our ice cream if there were no pollinators? Less ice cream, likely different flavors. There would be something, but it would be sad. Depends what the cows were fed. Nice, great. So if there were no more pollinators, we would have about 3/4 of the amount of ice cream. So if we're just thinking about the dairy that ice cream is made from, cows need high quality, nutritious forage as well. So cows eat foods like alfalfa and clover, which are pollinated by pollinators. So if there were no pollinators, the cows would not have enough to eat, and they might produce less milk, which would give us less ice cream. And if we think about those flavors as well, those would be impacted in terms of the different types of ice cream we might have. What about coffee? What would be left in our cup without pollinators? Nothing and very sad. Hot water, less coffee, close to nothing. Yeah, so without pollinators, we are left with less coffee. Coffee flowers are sometimes able to pollinate themselves, but insect pollinators help to improve production by about 25%. So if we had less coffee, it would also be more expensive coffee. Next up, we have pizza. So we've got our crust here, and then there's tomato sauce, some tomatoes, green peppers, and cheese. What would be left on our pizza? Crust and some cheese, just cheese, no sauce, less of everything. Crust and a small amount of toppings. Not much, just a pan. Yeah, good guesses. So if there were no pollinators, our pizza would be pretty sad. We would have just our crust and a little bit of cheese. So the crust is made from wheat, and wheat is a grain, and grains are actually pollinated by the wind. So they don't need help from animal or insect pollinators. Tomatoes do need help from pollinators. So tomatoes are pollinated by bumblebees. They do something called buzz pollination. So they're able to fly inside a flower. They vibrate their bodies at a certain frequency that helps to shake the pollen out and pollinate those tomato flowers. Pepper flowers need insect pollinators as well. And then we already talked about dairy, so same principle applies that applied to the ice cream. We would have a little bit less cheese on our pizza. So the pollinator plate is module 4 in Canvas. So there is a video that goes through, all of these foods that we just talked about, as well as a few more. And then there is a quiz that goes along with that. And I'm going to turn things back over to Elaine here
Right, as we're transitioning, I'm just gonna share another link with you. So, Elise talked about the pollinator plate being part of the toolkit. That presentation that we had with that we just were showing you with those slides, a lot of the pieces of the toolkit are available as digital presentations like that. And if you get accepted as a pollinator ambassador, you will receive a physical kit, but anyone is welcome to fill out the form and receive that online toolkit. You can even do that now if you want to and start exploring those materials. And so I just shared a link there to our general pollinator toolkit page that then has a link to a form that you fill out to get the link to connect with the with that online toolkit. Let's see, I need to find sharing. All right, so besides just that food on our plate, we know that pollinators are really important for lots of other things. So pollinators, if you remember back to that first slide Elise was showing, it talked about pollinators being responsible for pollinating about 80% of flowers that are out there. So those flowers are not only important for food on our plates, but food on the plates of everything else that's out there. So birds, frogs, so many other insects. Those plants are helping to maintain soil health and filter water. So these pollinators are helping all of these plants keep our ecosystems healthy and making sure that we have diverse, healthy populations. So we've talked about what pollination is, the impact of the pollinators. So who are the pollinators? There are a lot of different animals that are involved in pollinating. So bees are one that we'll talk about a lot. They are collecting pollen to feed their young. Because of that, they tend to move more pollen than most other pollinators. So most of the pollen that's moving around tends to be from bees. Flies are attracted to flowers. A lot of times the flowers they're attracted to don't smell very good to us. But flies can be really important. There can be a lot of them that are out there, and there's some plants that flies are really important pollinators for. Butterflies and moths have the quality where they're a lot of times flying farther than other pollinators. And this can be important for plants that are maintaining genetic health, spreading genes across populations. Wasps are something that people tend to ask a lot of questions about because there tends to be a lot of hate on wasps. But besides pollinating, so there are wasps that are really important pollinators. They also can be really important for pest control. Beetles were among the first insects to pollinate flowers 140 million years ago. So there's all kinds of beetles that you'll see out on flowers too. For birds, there are birds that pollinate flowers. In Minnesota, we have hummingbirds that can be really good pollinators. They tend to be focused on flowers that are red and have little or no scent. Bats are another pollinator, an animal pollinator. They can be really important in deserts and in the tropics. However, for our Minnesota bats, none of them are pollinators. So a lot of the pollinators that we're talking about then are insects. So looking at insect biology a little bit, what is making an insect an insect? So insects, one of the key features is that they have this exoskeleton. So they have this hard outside that is what they're attaching all their muscles to. It's made of a material called chitin. Insects also, they have 3 body parts. So they have a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. On that thorax is where all of their locomotion stuff is attached. So they have 3 pairs of legs and also wings that are attached to that thorax. They have compound eyes, so they have eyes that are made up of multiple facets, and they have two antennae. So in terms of what makes an insect, those are the main things, that three body parts, three pairs of legs, the compound eyes, the exoskeleton, the antennae. For wings, not all insects have wings. And they'll have different numbers of wings, so that's not something that's consistent across all insects. But if we go from insects to what is a bee, so bees are insects that get all of their food from flowers. They're usually fuzzy. They come in all different colors. And there's a lot of different shapes and sizes. The two pictured here are both from Minnesota, our largest and smallest bees that we have here in Minnesota, wide range of size. Another key feature for bees is their hairs, what their hairs are like. So they have these branched hairs. If you zoom in really close, it looks kind of like a stalk of wheat, like a feather. Those branched hairs really help the bees collect a lot of pollen. And so for telling bees apart when you're just outside looking at things on flowers, bees are generally going to be hairy. A lot of times you'll see them carrying pollen on the bees here. You can see some pollen on the back legs here. This bee has pollen on her abdomen. The pollen varies with the plants. So this pollen is kind of purple, but a lot of times pollen is orange or yellow. It can also be white. If you want to see those branched hairs, you really kind of need to get them underneath a microscope. But all these bees, they also have thin waists. They have broad hind legs. Another thing that you can use to pick bees apart is their behavior. So you'll usually see them visiting flowers. You'll often see them actively collecting pollen. And so unlike other things that may be on the flowers just to collect nectar, bees are really interested in the pollen. So a lot of times you'll see them really digging in there, really getting all coated with pollen. So the alternative to being a bee is being a wannabe. So there are a lot of times insects that people will notice on flowers that look a lot like bees, but they are not bees. So there are flies, wasps, moths that can look like bees. A lot of those are visiting flowers for nectar. They tend not to move as much pollen around. So wasps are a big category. Wasps are really diverse. The wasps you see on flowers are generally less hairy than bees. If you look at those hairs under a microscope, you'll see that they're not branched. They have a lot of times more noticeably slender waists and longer legs than bees. There are a lot of different colors and different sizes and different behaviors of wasps. Wasps are really diverse and are doing all kinds of beautiful things. Digger wasps are one kind of wasp that are very closely related to bees. So this great black wasp is one that is really striking and noticeable with those kind of purple black wings. Those are ones that you may notice around. Other kinds of wasps, there are potter wasps, bee wolves, mud daubers, all kinds of beautiful, interesting wasps. For flies, there are a few different things to look for when you're trying to tell flies apart from bees. So all of these on here are flies, even though some of them are very good at looking like bees. Some of the things to look for are looking at the eyes. Flies tend to have these really large eyes and stubby antennae. They are usually less hairy. This one in the middle here is an exception to that rule. But it does have these kind of weird eyes and stubby antenna. They only have two wings. Bees have four wings. They have front and hind wings. It can be kind of hard to see when they're moving around and flying around, but it is something you can use to tell them apart from each other. Moths, most moths are gonna look very different than bees, but there are some that are pretty good mimics. Look for, when you're looking at them, you'll notice that they don't have that skinny waist like the bees do. Their antennae are really long and straight and often fuzzy. A lot of times they have a long tongue that goes out to collect nectar rather than kind of getting in there like the bees do. So in general, the moths, the flies, the wasps are gonna have less contact with pollen. That you'll see them kind of sticking their tongues in there, getting the nectar, but you won't notice a lot of pollen covering their bodies like you do with the bees. So we are going to now play a little game here that is, oh, Elise is gonna play the game.
Well, we're just
So-
gonna introduce this as one of the activities.
And I am going to stop sharing.
No, we're not, the bees are
Oh, I'm not
wannabes
stopping to share.
is. The bees and wannabes is one of the activities that's included in the pollinator toolkit. That slide is just introducing.
Oh, okay. I'm still
Activity.
doing this, but I'm not doing the activity. Thank you.
Sorry.
It's okay. As you can see, Elise is the one who knows what's happening. But we do have an interactive slide set, and there's also a poster that comes with the toolkit for the bees and wannabes. So there's some fun stuff with those. But since we are moving along here, we wanted to give you time to take a short break. We can take a few questions before the break if anyone has questions about this content or anything like that. I'll look in the chat and see if there's anything there. Oh yeah, so one person, Abby, was asking about the pollinator education toolkit, and yeah, those toolkits are something that you do receive if you do graduate and become a pollinator ambassador. We are able to supply you with a toolkit. For needing to apply today, application will be open for
Until the end of the year.
yeah.
Yeah.
For the foreseeable future. So no need to apply today. We are, starting this training and hoping to have kind of a cohort that you can work together so we can have active discussions and things like that in the Canvas time. There's not a time limit to completing the training either. So we've had ambassadors that have, started the training and then realized they got caught up in other stuff. You can come back to it later. It doesn't matter when. We're really cued into when you are doing that cumulative quiz at the end. We do have a form that we have you fill out for when you do, someone was asking, Abby was also asking, how do you report events? So we do have a form that we ask you to fill out to let us know after your event to give us those numbers.
That form is currently on the Pollinator Ambassadors website, the pollinatorambassadors.umn.edu. But we should put that in Canvas as well, so you'll be able to find it in both places.
All right, so are we good with just like a 5-minute break? Coming back at 6:28.
Yeah, take a break. You can use the bathroom, get some water. Open the application on your computer.
Yeah. Oh, and if you apply in July, the 5 events is within a calendar year from when you start. So yeah.
Awesome. All right, we'll see you back here at 6:28. All right, welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a nice, quick little break there from things. We've got kind of a lot more content we want to get through here, so I think we're going to dive back in.
Yeah, hopefully you had a chance to take a nice stretch and a deep breath. We're getting more information for you. So we were just talking about all the different kinds of things that are pollinators. A thing that we have in the toolkit are these pollinator diversity cards. So I'm just going to briefly introduce you to what these pollinator diversity cards are like. They have one side that has a photo of a pollinator, which, by the way, all of these photos are from scientists that contributed them, community scientists on iNaturalist. There will be the common name of the bee, the scientific name. Actually, this is the approximate number of species in North America. We updated that so that these would be useful, not just in Minnesota. We have key characteristics on how to identify the bee, some biology information about how they live, a size range, and then we have fun facts for all of these different insects. We have a video that's available again to help you go through and figure out what's happening there, and those are available in Module 5 in Canvas. Another question that we get a lot is about how bees are doing. So we have some information on the status of pollinators that we call fine or in decline. And so for some pollinator populations, we know that they're in decline, some are stable. For most of the pollinators, it's this really diverse group, and we don't really know how they're doing, but there's a few that we do know that we do have information on. So for the bumblebees, they have been studied pretty well. We know that roughly 1 in 3 species of bumblebee are in decline. So there are some species of bumblebee that seem to be doing pretty well, but a good number of them are not doing well. Many of you may have heard of the rusty patch bumblebee. It was once common. It's now facing extinction. It has been listed federally here in the US as an endangered species since 2017. So before the year 2000, it was pretty common through most of northern from kind of Minnesota over to the East Coast up into Canada a little bit, and kind of then down south along the Appalachians. And here in Minnesota, it was one of the more common bees. Currently, it's only found in these kind of red, the yellow and red areas. It's really reduced where it is. It's disappeared from most of its range. There's some kind of strongholds here in the upper Midwest, and then there's also some that are showing up in the Appalachians. For honeybees, so there's a lot of concern. People hear about honeybees, hear about honeybee declines. So honeybees are not in decline. If we just look at the number of honeybees that are out there, they do have health problems. The colony numbers are stable because beekeepers currently are able to keep raising more bees. Monarchs are another one. They are being considered for listing as an endangered species right now. And so that is a species where they have been in decline. They've been decreasing over at least the last 25 years. And the graph here is from their overwintering area in Mexico. They have this handy thing where when the population from Eastern North America migrates down to Mexico, they all go down to a limited area, and they can just go around and see how much area they're taking up to see. And unfortunately, what they're seeing is a pretty severe decline. So in addition to that Eastern population that migrates down to Mexico, there's also a Western population of monarchs. that does not migrate down to Mexico. They have also been doing very poorly. You can see a really severe drop there in the 90s. Really, there were some really scary numbers there for a few years, 2018, 2019. Still not out of the woods with really low populations, despite a lot of so the green line is the number of monarchs that people are seeing. The blue line is the number of places people are watching them. So people are really looking out for them a lot and unfortunately not finding them. Related to monarchs, we do have a game that's in a board game that is part of the toolkit. And that is, we have a video to help figure out how to play that game. And that's related to the kind of risks that monarchs have as they're going around doing their things. How do we go from having so many eggs that the monarchs are laying to so few adults? So now that we see that there are declines that are happening, what is causing the decline? So we know that there are a few different things that are important and that there's a lot of interactions between all these. So you can see all these lines connecting these. At the center is habitat loss. We know that habitat loss is a really major problem for all of these different pollinators. They are relying on habitat for places to live and things to eat. Because of that, they can end up having poor nutrition when they have fewer flowers, having more pesticides in the environment, more parasites and diseases, global climate change. These things all cause stress and interact in ways that compound the damage that's done. So for example, habitat, when they don't have enough food to eat, their immune system isn't as strong and they can become more susceptible to some of those pathogens and diseases. There's parasites that spread the pathogens. Climate change leads to have more habitat loss. So this again is available. We have a video that helps explain this more, and that is a module 6 in Canvas. The main drop points that we really want pollinator ambassadors to drill into your head, particularly important, are these 4 action steps to help pollinators. So there's lots of things that people can do, but I find as an educator, it helps me to have this number in my head. So if anybody is ever asking me, what can I do to help? I can remember to say all of these 4 things. And if I get to 3, I know that there's one more, and then I can remember to say the next one. So these 4 action steps are something that's available as a presentation that you can use. There's a poster, and it's just something that you can use in talking to people. So that first action step that we're talking about is planting flowers. We want to attract diverse pollinators, and to do that, you need diverse flowers. You're looking for having flowers that bloom from early spring through the fall to be able to support all kinds of different pollinators. And part of this is keeping those flowers free of pesticides, including fungicides and insecticides. And Elise mentioned some of the new modules that we added. We do have one that digs into pesticides. So if you really want to be prepared to answer people's questions about pesticides, we've tried to get all the kind of questions that we usually get and dug into the science to give you the most up-to-date information there. We do have a game also in the toolkit that's about pollinator gardens. So there's a video that you can look at to learn how to play that game where people create their own gardens. The second action step is providing homes. So whereas managed bees like honeybees, they have a box that they're in. All of these other bees and other pollinators are making their homes out there in the wild. So that some of them are nesting in the ground. So having just All kinds of different natural habitats. So some bare soil, some covered with leaves, disturbed, undisturbed, a mix of different things for the diversity of ground nesting bees is really helpful. There are cavity nesting bees that some of them are nesting in plant stems. This is a small carpenter bee here going into a plant stem. Some of them will also go into logs, so just having dead trees, fallen logs in your garden, can help provide that habitat. Bumblebee nests are a little bit different. They are going into any kind of a cavity. A lot of times they're in a former rodent nest. But habitat for them, you can help create it by having just piles of grass, sticks, undisturbed areas. I talk about messy corners in gardens. So just having areas that are just kind of left alone. Those can be great places for bumblebees to make their nests. We also want to have host plants for caterpillars. So here is a monarch on the milkweed, which they famously need, but there are a lot of other kinds of moths and butterflies that need all kinds of different plants as their host plants. So generally having those diverse native plants is going to be really good, important for providing homes for caterpillars. We want you to talk about taking climate action. So this is our third step for helping pollinators. We know that pollinators are impacted by with range shifts as temperatures change, when there's things like droughts, floods, fires, all those kind of extreme climate events. They can be really susceptible to what's going on there. As cold-blooded insects are totally dependent on the temperature that's around them. So we know that they're very susceptible. So climate action, encouraging people to use clean energy sources, planting not just trees, but actually those native plants and the grasslands they can have really deep root systems that can help sequester carbon, supporting sustainable agriculture and supporting environmental and regulations are all things that can help us with climate. We also love to talk to people about collecting data. There are a lot of different things that people can do to get out there, take notice of what's going on and collect data, turn it into programs like iNaturalist or Bumblebee Watch, the Monarch Larva Monitoring Project, or projects that Elise and I are managing with the Bumblebee Atlas and NestQuest, to help scientists learn more about what's going on with the pollinators. So these 4 actions are in module 7 in Canvas.
One thing I want to add to about the 4 actions really quickly, so we are providing you with all of these different materials that you can use when you're giving a presentation or when you're tabling, but the 4 actions is kind of key. We want you to be including that in every single type of presentation that you are giving. So if there's one thing your audience is going to take away, it would be great if it could be the 4 actions. All right, so I'm going to share my screen again. We're just gonna finish up here with some of the questions from our pollinator trivia, and then hopefully we will have a little bit more time to answer some more questions. So one of my favorite parts of the pollinator toolkit is the pollinator trivia. So this is a new-ish component of the pollinator toolkits. We've always had the trivia, but we just created an actual card set for the trivia questions, which is really great for all different types of events. It's great for tabling, it's great for giving a formal presentation, but we'll just go through some of the questions from level 1, just as a fun little way to wrap things up here. So our first trivia question is, many insects act as pollinators. Which of these insects are not pollinators? A, wasps, B, flies, C, beetles, or D, dragonflies. You can go ahead and pop your answer in the chat. B. I'm seeing lots of people putting in dragonflies. And that is the correct answer. So dragonflies do not visit flowers for nectar or pollen. They are eating other insects. Beetles, wasps, and flies all visit flowers to forage for nectar and pollen. Some plants are dependent on beetles, flies, or wasps for pollination. Next question. What is the sweet reward that plants produce to attract pollinators to come to flowers? See lots of correct answers. Nectar. So most flowers need pollinators to reproduce. By producing nectar in parts of the plant that force pollinators to come in contact with pollen, flowers are able to use pollinators to transfer their pollen to flowers that need it to produce seeds and fruits. Next question. Where do most bee species make their nests? A, in trees, B, in the ground, C, in plant stems, or D, in the grass? We'll say B. Yeah, B is correct, in the ground. So over 80% of bee species make their nests in the ground. And don't confuse these solitary ground nesting bees with more territorial yellow jacket wasps. You can help diverse bees find homes by having varied soil types and conditions in your garden. So this includes bare soil, leaf cover, disturbed soil, undisturbed soil, sand, and clay. One more here. Which of the following is not a way that pesticides, so this includes insecticides, fungicides, and herbicides, harm pollinators? A, cause blindness. B, interfere with navigation. C, make more susceptible to disease. Or D, reduce food availability. This one's a little bit trickier. So pesticides do not cause blindness. They are not known to impair insect vision. Pesticides can reduce health by interfering with navigation or increasing susceptibility to disease. Although herbicides are meant to kill weeds, they can kill flowering plants that pollinators need for food. On what body part do most leafcutter bees carry most of their pollen? A, their bellies, B, their legs, C, in their armpits, or D, on their foreheads. So leafcutter bees carry most of their pollen on their bellies. So they have hair on the undersides of their abdomen. This is a really good photo that shows those. You can kind of see the hairs and the pollen grains there. If you said legs, you would be correct in most other cases. Most other bees carry most of their pollen on their legs. Right, this is our final trivia question for tonight. True or false? Teaching others about pollinators is a great start to support bee conservation. This one is true. So talking to your family, your friends, your neighbors, and your coworkers about how they can help pollinators is a great way to help pollinator conservation. Becoming a pollinator ambassador is a great way to help pollinator conservation. So that is all we have for you tonight for part 1 of training. All of this content is available on our websites. you join us next Wednesday, the 19th, from again 5:30 to 7 p.m. We will talk about kind of volunteering 101. So we'll be getting into the basics of public speaking, how to set up a table at an event, answering questions at events, that kind of thing. So I'll drop the registration link for that in the chat here in a second. You can also reach out to Elaine or myself. We can share our contact information with you. But I think we have a little bit of time here to answer any final questions from people.
And besides the chat at this point, if you want to unmute and ask, feel free to ask that way too.
Hi, it's Molly. I have a question. The fact about 80% of plants rely on animals for pollination, is that plant species?
That is
That-
plant species, yeah, and that does, that's kind of globally an average. There's some areas in the world where it's less and some where it's more. You know, like the tropics has a lot of pollinator dependent plants, but other areas, you know, when you get up into, you know, like the Arctic where there's lots of conifers that are wind pollinated, it's not, you know, they're not so dependent on pollinators, but yeah, it's the species, not their abundance on the landscape. Let's see, I see a question there about biofungicide. I'm not familiar with Promix. And I'm not sure what biofungicides are and how they work, but one of the reasons that fungicides are harmful or can be harmful, there's a few different ways that fungicides can be harmful for bees, but one of the ways is that they can reduce the nutrition that's available to the bees, because bees, when they're eating pollen, the pollen is mixed with nectar, and there's actually a lot of microbes that grow in there. So there's a lot of yeasts and other things like that end up making up actually most of the nutrition for the bees. So even though the bees are collecting pollen, they're really living off of those microbes. And so the fungicides that interfere with those microbes interfere with the bees' nutrition. So I would imagine even if it's a, you know, kind of a natural fungicide, if it would be harming those or, you know, killing those microbes, then that could have a negative impact on the bees. But I'm not familiar exactly with what that is and if there's any research on that, but that's just looking at how it works. I would suspect, oh, I see someone, it's a bacillus. Oh, okay. So yeah, if it is really targeting really specific soil-borne pathogens and not impacting other microbes, then it may not. There's a good question there. Elise has a good answer in there for native versus non-native plants. We do, for one of the approaches I use for that is if it's, you know, kind of if you're planting new things in a new area, native plants are kind of the easiest thing to go with that we know is gonna work well. With non-native plants, it's kind of a mix. You need to pay a bit more attention because some of the non-native plants have been bred so that so that they are not producing as much pollen and nectar. Some of them aren't producing pollen and nectar. So by going with native plants, we know that they're providing the resources that we expect them to. We know that there's a bunch of other animals that will be using those native plants. So generally it's going to be the most beneficial. But you know, if you have a garden already established, you can kind of see what bees are using. You know, it's better to have some plants there that are blooming than not having anything at all. So expense can be a thing too. It can be not everybody can afford to get to the natural, the native plant resources, or they may not have access to do their own seed starting and seed collecting and all that's involved in that. So so it's good to give people options.
There. My name is Matt Piccolo. I'm at the Itasca County Soil and Water Conservation District here up in Grand Rapids. Thank you for your time this evening in putting all this together. I'm a forester, so not so much, dealing with annual and perennial flower, smaller plants. Tend to deal with larger plants. And I was hoping that, or maybe if you have more information about early pollinator tree species. I know, for example, maples are very important early spring sources of nectar for bees and other insects. I was looking for more information, so when I'm doing outreach for the landowners in this area and talking about trees to select for the areas, that I can give them more information about pollinator resources regarding trees that they can plant. And that's something we can deal with separately as well. So
yeah, there is a resource that I shared earlier up there. We have the Bee Lab we put together. It's called Planting Resources, where it's kind of a compilation of resources.
I'll find the link.
And yeah, so it's in the chat up there somewhere, but Lisa's going to put it in again. And in there there's sections in there where we do have plant lists, and there are some woodland plant lists. And I know there's more resources coming on the way too. Here in extension, there's been a whole great resource that's recently been put together for climate ready woodlands, and they have the pollinator status for all of those trees too. So they're still kind of, I think, getting all that stuff publicly accessible, but they have a huge list. And have pollinator use status for a lot of those.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, trees are important too. So when people talk about, a lot of times I remember to say that when planting flowers, we think of these little garden plants, but trees and shrubs are really important sources for bees, especially early in the season. But yeah,
one of the earliest blossoming species is the much maligned box elder, which is also a maple tree. So,
yeah.
All right, thank you.
Do you know the common name for Duforium monarde? Someone asked what the bee was on the in the picture I used on the break slide. I don't know what the common name is for Duforium monarde.
I'm not sure either. It's a sweat bee. Yeah, they're cool.
Awesome. Any final questions from anybody? All right, well, I put my email in the chat, as well as the link to registration for next week's training. Our Pollinator Ambassadors website just generally should be able to answer your questions, about getting involved in the program. Our contact information and things are on there as well. But we hope to see you all next week for part 2 of training. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, we really appreciate your time.
All right, take care, everyone.